now my 6th COP. I feel very fortunate that I've been able to go, and it's important for people to know it's all on my own nickel. The taxpayers are not paying for this. But I just feel like it's so important to go to find new solutions, because many local governments are represented here and have been for years, partly through the organization that I'm the US board chair for, which is called ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. And it's a worldwide organization of local governments who have had a role with the United Nations COP process. And that's how I've been able to come now 6 different times. This, I think, is the first COP where there's been a formal recognition of local governments, and there's a specific day set aside to the role of local governments. And you have to have local governments engaged. We are responsible globally for about 70% or so of greenhouse gas emissions. They happen in cities and local governments, so you have to get us engaged. I think for too long people have thought, well, the nations of the world are taking care of it. They're meeting and they're going to fix this problem, and it's clear they can't do it by themselves. Cities were a very visible part of that COP in Paris in 2015, and every year since there's been more and more of a very concerted effort to have local governments be more engaged, leading up to this, where I think we really are seeing the fruition of it for the first time. And it's been many parties working on it, but ICLEI's been at it the longest and has laid the largest amount of groundwork for it. So it's crucial that local governments be engaged, and I think it's crucial that there be clear expectations for local governments. Here is a menu of things local governments must do, and then there has to be a clear accounting for the impact of the actions of local governments. Those pieces aren't there yet, but I think that's part of what we're going to be creating through this COP. In Texas, we have a number of local governments that are members of ICLEI, and we've talked a lot about creating, sort of a state coalition around this, but there's great support. And one of the key things that ICLEI is doing in Texas and elsewhere is helping local governments qualify for the Inflation Reduction Act monies. And they've been smart. The Biden administration has not gotten anywhere near enough credit for the profoundly important work they're doing on climate, more than any other president. But they are requiring for cities to access some of that money that they first have to do a greenhouse gas inventory, understand where their emissions are coming from, and then create a climate action plan. So they at least have a plan for what they're going to do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to better prepare their communities. And ICLEI is the major organization working with local governments to help them do both those things so they can qualify. We have really unique challenges in Texas. We have a governor who is hostile to even talking about climate change. They're still telling scientists, you can't include that language in your reports. And so it's really see no evil, hear no evil, at least their version of evil. And it's incredibly difficult to prepare for the impacts of climate change when you are actively denying that it's happening. Part of the reason I'm here is because our community in Austin will be so powerfully impacted by climate change. We already have been. I think Winter Storm Uri, where people were in the dark and the freezing cold and then their water, froze up, was a real wake-up call for a lot of people to realize, wow, I guess I will be affected by climate change. We know that we're a hugely wildfire-prone region, just right behind California, highest in the nation behind California. What are people doing elsewhere in the world where they're facing these challenges? There were some interesting lessons from Canadian provinces. Their water planning mechanisms are ordered around watersheds. Not political boundaries, but watersheds, which is really the way it should be. The mayor of Fremont, California, Mayor May, which also has a Tesla plant, has a program where they're requiring Tesla to not only train people for the work that's happening at the Tesla plant, but support them for further continuing education beyond just the training for the Tesla work. And I wrote that one down. I said, I'm going to bring that one back and talk to Tesla about doing that as well. So there are just so many different examples of what different communities are doing to deal with somewhat similar problems. And we are gonna have to borrow and steal best practices from everywhere. I just feel like women bring so much more to the table. And we are naturally, I think, oriented to look out for others. And I think that's going to be a huge part of what we will all have to do, because so much of the world is going to be in crisis in one way or another. And particularly around how climate is disrupting people and forcing people to move from their homes. Many people will have to move north, will have to relocate. So how do we do that in a just and equitable way? Not a winner take all, but how do we do it in a just way? Well, first of all, you've got to figure out who pays. And is it just the rich that soak up all the insurance money and take the advantage of structures designed for them? Or do we figure out a fair and equitable way to assist people with that kind of transition? And I think those are the kinds of questions that women are asking. That's the perspective that many women are bringing. And we've learned incredibly valuable lessons. I'll give you just one. I was on a panel with the mayor of Bogota, Claudia Lopez, who's brilliant. And she talked about how Bogota has seen 600,000 refugees from Venezuela. Part of it's the political disruption, but part of what feeds that political disruption is climate change, the impacts of climate change. But for lots of reasons, many Venezuelans are migrating away from their countries. So Bogota has 600,000 new residents, and instead of treating them like criminals or hate-mongering and fear-mongering about the immigrants, they've embraced them. And I think that's a lesson we all need to learn, because there are going to be a lot of people who are displaced, and we might be among them.